Hi, this is John Macdonald from ProScot Rider and Driver Training. In the last video, Element C Part 1, we looked at moving off and stopping, rear observation and changing gear. Now we're going to look particularly at slow speed riding control skills, in particular slalom, figure of 8 and U-turns. These will not only help you for your CBT, but these will also be of great use for those going on to sit their Module 1 test for direct access or their A2 licence. Thanks for watching. First of all, let's explain why we need to slow speed ride on a motorcycle. There's going to be times and occasions when you're going to be maybe in slow moving traffic. Typically the traffic's moving along at walking pace, or could be even slower than walking pace. Now if it is moving slower than walking pace, because let's be honest here, the slowest speed that you could be expected to balance is probably around about walking pace, which is 3 to 4 miles per hour. Anything slower than that, you're going to start to wobble on a motorcycle. And what you would do is, if the traffic was moving that slow, you would stop, pause, allow the traffic to move ahead, and then move forward, take up the gap. So in other words, we use a technique whereby you're not really, you're more doing a thing called peep and creep, and this is particularly the skill that you would use at junctions. So you're at a closed junction, for example, you're emerging out and you can't see for parked cars, your vision's restricted. It's quite clear you can't bring your feet up and balance to come out that slow, to creep out, to be able to open up your zone of vision. So you use a technique called peep and creep, where you're not really doing slow speed riding as such, you're just allowing the clutch to go out far enough to drive the bike and make it move forward slowly, but not enough to get balance. And what you're doing is kind of skipping on the left foot, and I'm going to show you that technique as well, and I'm going to show you the slow speed riding. So slow speed riding is where you can bring both feet up onto the foot peg. So typically you're doing at least 3 to 4 miles per hour, what would consider to be walking pace then. The technique is having a little lively hum, the throttle more or less steady, just a little lively hum, around about maybe 2,000 revs, just generating just enough power without so the bike's just above tick over, what we call a lively hum. The clutch is placed just at the biting point and just slightly out from that, maybe just 2 or 3 credit cards out from the biting point. So once you get moving, move off, pulling the clutch back in slightly. So there's just enough drive to maintain momentum for the motorcycle. And this is where the clutch is said to be slipping. So the clutch plates are slipping together. Americans call it the friction zone. So you've got a steady throttle, there or thereabouts, clutch just at the slipping point, and you're using a little bit of rear brake as well, and you're balancing all 3 of those controls to be able to make the bike go at slow speed. For example, if you feel you need a little bit more speed, then a lot of people think you should open up the revs more. You could open up a little bit more, but if you're slipping the clutch it won't go any faster. You'll really need to ease the clutch out, maybe the thickness of a credit card, just to give it that bit more drive. That's typically, you need that if you feel you're going too slow, or if it's maybe on a slight incline. Meanwhile, if you feel you were going too fast, you would pull the clutch in slightly, maybe about the thickness of a credit card. And if you feel it's still rolling away from you, i.e. it's maybe slightly downhill, then you would use a little bit of rear brake as well, just to help control the speed of the bike as well. So effectively you're balancing the throttle, the clutch and the rear brake to make the bike move at slow speed. So let's actually show this now then, the slow speed riding. And I'm going to get Lewis just to walk alongside me as I actually explain what I'm doing. So come with me then, Lewis, we're going to move off. I'm going to put my visor helmet down so you should still be able to hear me. Okay, so here we go then. Come with me, Lewis. And I'm going to put 2 fingers on so you see what I'm doing. Now walk with me, Lewis. Now at the moment I've got a little steady rev. You can see here just about 3,000 revs on the rev counter there. And I've got the clutch just at the slipping point, and I've got a little bit of rear brake on just now, very light rear brake. I'm going down our slope here, which is a slight slope downhill. Notice how I knock the throttle off, pull the clutch in slightly below the biting point, and I'm just controlling the rate of descent with my rear brake now. As I go along the level a bit, I bring the revs up a little bit more, ease the clutch out the thickness of a credit card, come off my back brake, so I'm hardly touching it at all now, point it up the slope, a little bit of rev, ease the clutch out another credit card, just to give it a little bit more drive. If I pull it in too much, I go too slow and I start to wobble, ease it out a credit card, give it enough drive just to maintain the momentum. And there we go, nice and slow. So what I'm doing here is just really controlling the speed of the motorcycle through the clutch. This throttle, as you can see here, if I twist it, it doesn't make it go any faster. That's like setting the water pressure. So if we stop then, a nice way to think about it is this here's like setting the power, setting the the tap in your house. It's like the water pressure, so I'm setting a certain amount of power, and then I'm controlling how that power gets to the back wheel. So that's me like effectively turning the tap on and determining the flow. If I turn the tap on more, I get more water, more flow of water, and if I turn the tap in, then I get less flow of water. It's the same with the clutch here. If I ease the clutch out, I'm increasing the power towards the back wheel, and if I pull the clutch in, I'm reducing the amount of power. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of setting it fixed here with the throttle, and then controlling the rate. Now once you actually allow the clutch to engage fully, of course, as I'm going to show you just now if we come loose, if I allow the clutch to engage fully like I'm doing just now, then the bike's going at a speed determined by the natural tick over and the ratio of first gear, and the clutch is out. And you can see there it was doing 5 miles per hour on the speedo there, and it's back down to 4 now. Now if I open the throttle up a bit with the clutch out, you'll see the bike's quite jerky, and later on I'll show just how jerky this would be on a big bike. And Lewis is having to run to keep up with me. So there we go now, just steady throttle, slipping the clutch. Now I'm just reducing the revs, clutching a little bit, back brake on, and I'm lifting my vision, looking where I'm going. Now let's suppose I wanted to go slower than this, because at the moment this is about as slow as I can go without wobbling too much. And this is probably about 2 miles per hour at the moment. Probably about 2 miles per hour, and this is as slow as I could probably go. But let's say I was having to go slower than that. This is a technique we would use. Let's say it was slow traffic, and I was trying to go at this speed. And you can see there now how difficult it is to control a motorcycle at this speed. You wouldn't do it. So what would you do? Well, you would let the traffic in front of you move on a bit, and then once they've moved on a bit, you would just simply do what I'm doing now. Lift the foot, move forward, brake, and place it back down again. What we call peep and creep. And you can see you could do that I'm just using the back brake, and I'm just moving a half a metre at a time. Now you can imagine me now at a junction using peep and creep here and just easing out gently, but I'm not balancing the bike. I'm not trying to bring my feet up and look at the junction and wobbling. I'm using peep and creep. Alright, so there you go. There's me showed you a couple of different techniques then for slow speed riding. The one where you've got the feet up and you're riding round sort of 3 to 4 miles per hour. And the one where if I needed to go really slow, instead of wobbling everywhere, we're using that sort of peep and creep where you just lift the foot, move forward, stop, and put the foot back down again. I didn't even put the foot up on the foot peg, I just lifted, hovered and placed it back down. And we'll show you all those techniques. Because now we're going to look at all the slow speed bike control manoeuvres that we do. Now, whilst, if you remember I said in B, whilst we teach slalom here in the CBT, it is not actually part of the CBT. The reason that we teach it is it's a lovely lead-in for the figure of 8 and for the U-turn, and also because for anyone that's going to do direct access, you will be doing slalom, which Lewis, if we look at the cones, we've got the cones separated. It's just about your ski Sunday, you slalom through the cones, wiggle through the cones. Alright, so that's we do introduce that in our CBT. Now let's explain our yard. A lot of people are confused by our yard. I've had 3 yards since I started ProScot in 1996. First one I had was on a slight slope, and the examiners always used to comment on how excellent the clutch control was on our students. And then we got a completely flat yard, and we noticed ourselves that the clutch control during CBT wasn't as good, and when we went out on the road and had to deal with cambers and slopes, the clutch control wasn't as good. And when they made the transition to the big bike, the clutch control wasn't as good. And there's a good reason for this, and I think I showed that in the previous video. It's very easy to cheat. You can move off, and once you move off, close the throttle, allow the clutch to engage fully on a 125, and literally just steer it around. Now the problem with that is you're setting yourself up for a fall when you go to jump on the big bike, because whilst the little bike will tick over and it will pull you around, especially now with fuel injection, old carburetor models, if you went on any kind of incline would want to judder and stall, but because of the fuel injection now, the bike senses that and it increases the rev slightly to assist you on any slope, but you're effectively cheating. You've got the clutch plates connected hard together, and all you're doing is just steering the bike round. Now the little 125 will go at 3 to 4 miles per hour, and that will be fine for slow speed control. However, Lewis, if I have a look in the middle of the yard, once you make the jump up to this baby, the Suzuki SV650, you're going to find that when you allow the clutch out fully on that and you close the throttle, that does about between 7 and 8 miles per hour. Now some bikes go even faster than that in first gear with a closed throttle. In other words, it would be impossible to try and manoeuvre through your cones with any sense of control. And if you try to then apply the rear brake to slow the bike down, the bike starts to fight against you, and if you apply too much rear brake, that you'll cause the bike to stall and to fall over. So you would need to slip the clutch with a big bike. This is why when we teach the CBT, and we always have taught it this way, we've never taught cheat method. We've always taught, imagine you're making the transition to a big bike and you're going to be getting on the big bike. Learn how to slip and ride the clutch properly. Now, the reason I've got my yard on a slight slope, and it's the same degree of slope that you would have on a B-class road, incidentally, for natural drainage, for crown camber, the slope to left and to the right, and that's what's built into this yard here, is so that when you're circulating round about this yard, when you're going down, you're learning to reduce the engine power, you're learning to disengage the clutch slightly below the biting point, and you're learning to drag a little bit of rear brake to control the speed on the descent. As you go along the bottom, when it's level, and the top where it's completely level, you're learning now to come off the rear brake, you're learning to engage the clutch a little bit more, just out from the biting point, and generate just enough clutch drive, and then perhaps pick the revs up just enough to balance all the controls so that you can generate smooth movement along the bottom. Of course, now when you start to point the bike slightly up the slope, you'll find now you need to increase the revs slightly, ease the clutch out maybe another credit card, and ease off the back brake, and use the slope as a natural resistance. So what you're doing in effect then is continually balancing throttle, clutch and rear brake and adjusting for camber and slope. Now you need to be able to do this, because this isn't Holland, it's Scotland. You've got slopes and you've got gradients. For example, when you merge left out of our road end, if you go left you're going downhill, and if you're going right you're going uphill. How you control and balance the throttle, the clutch and the rear brakes completely different for whether it's a left-hand emerge down the slope or a right-hand emerge up. So that's why ProScot intentionally have the slope that we've got. It's why we've got some of the best riders around, without a doubt, because this is a tough yard to learn to ride in. But once you've mastered it in here, you can ride anywhere, trust me. In the Mod 1 test, it's easy after that because it's all on the level. So we want you to learn how to do it properly, and I'm going to explain what I'm doing now as I'm riding round. So, slalom. Well, you'll see here I've got a set of cones on the far side, Lewis, set down that side, and I've got a set of cones on this side. Now the idea here now with slalom, and as I say it's not in the CBT as such, but we introduce it, is you're developing not only balance here, but you're developing steering control as well. So we want to see your hand-eye coordination, your balance, your ability to balance the throttle, the clutch, the rear brake, and your ability to actually make the bike go and steer it where you want to go. Now, here's a little tip for the slalom, and if you start at the top here, Lewis, and you look down the cones, it can be a bit intimidating when you look straight down the cones. It looks like they're all close together, but if you come to the side, Lewis, and you have a look, you'll actually see there is in fact a big gap between the cones, alright? So it's a big gap, and certainly more than enough for a motorcycle to go through. Now the idea when you're doing slalom is not to focus on the first cone and then just look at the second. The idea is to move your eyes up and down. So Lewis, if you sort of focus on the one cone here and just look into that, you'll notice now that I don't know what's happening with the second cone. It's very hard to tell what's happening with that second cone. I can't see it. Now that's what we call target fixation. You need to be able to lift and extend the vision, and that's something that we're teaching even early on in the CBT. Now if we lift the vision up, Lewis, and sort of scan the camera up and down from top to bottom, you can actually see all the cones, and that's what you want to be able to do. You want to be able to see the series of cones. Now you want to be about half a metre out from the cone, like where I am just now, as a minimum. Any closer than that and you're going to clip the cone, to a metre maximum. So basically, that's about as tight as you're going to be where my right foot is, and this is about as far away as you're going to be. You're going to be within this range. A lot of people think, wrongly, if I go wide, I'll make it easier for myself. You don't. You end up zigzagging too much, and it's going to be very difficult for you, okay? So, what we're doing here, as I say, is between half a metre and a metre, and we cross through roughly about the midpoint here, round about the midpoint, and again through about the midpoint. So you're about the midpoint between the cones, and as I say, half a metre to a metre, and moving up and down your vision and balancing the controls effectively. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show initially proper clutch control, and then I'm going to show someday not controlling the clutch properly to show the effect it has. Again, I'll put my visor down for this one. You should still be able to hear me because I've got a mic fitted. So, in fact, what I'll do is I'll actually go around the other way and make it a bit easier for Lewis to film. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter in here at the top, and at the moment I don't need any rev at all. I'm pulling the clutch in slightly, so look, see, no rev. Okay, I've got the clutch pulled in and I'm just controlling with the back brake my descent. So the clutch is disengaged and I'm controlling it with the back brake. Now along the bottom here I'm just picking the revs up a little bit, easing the clutch out a little bit, easing off the back brake, looking forward. I've got the revs a little bit, I'm off the back brake completely now, and I'm generating just enough clutch control to keep the bike moving through the cones. So again, I'm going to show you that. Enter between the first and the second, closing the revs, clutching a little bit, controlling with the back brake, and just controlling my rate of descent as I'm going down the slope, just letting the bike roll for me. Along the bottom, picking the revs up a little bit, easing the clutch out, about a credit card, off the back brake, you'll see. And I'm just keeping it moving nice, moving my vision up and down, crossing through the middle, about half a metre from the cones, and just wiggling through nicely, looking for where I need to go next. Now, you'll see here I've got the clutch out totally, I've got my hand off the throttle, hand off the clutch, and the bike's been determined now, it's now going at the speed determined by the natural tick over, and I'm off the back brake. So at the moment, as you can see, I'm effectively cheating. Now, going up the slope here as well, you'll see the little bike, the fuel injection system will kick in, and away you go. She just pulls me up the hill, up the wee slope that we've got here. And it looks like I'm doing proper bike control, doesn't it? But you know fine well I'm not, because I'm just hanging onto the mirrors and dangling my feet here. And then when I go down the slope, again it looks like I've got full bike control, but I've not. Now I could tell you this certainly would not work on a big bike, but you can cheat on a little 125 like I'm doing. Now, watch what happens if I'm a little bit aggressive with the throttle and the clutch is out fully. See how I touch it and she wants to go. And it's like an on-off switch. Now on a big bike, it's even worse than that, I can assure you. I'm going to demonstrate on the big bike in a second. So if I'm jerky on the throttle with the clutch out, it's very difficult to control the bike. But if I'm very gentle with the throttle, I can have the clutch, because you know I'm not got the clutch now, my left hand's in the air. I'm actually wiggling through the cones here, and it looks like I'm doing it fine, and I am on a 125, but I'd struggle, as I say, with the big bike. Now let's actually show what's happening now on the larger motorcycle. If I now jump onto a larger bike and demonstrate on the larger bike. Okay, we're now going to go into the larger bike. Oh, had a neutral light there for some reason, but and it is a neutral. There you go, that was weird. Cut out for some reason when I put the stand down. Right then, so let me now show you what I mean if we do this now on the larger motorcycle. Okay, so let's first of all show the speed that the larger bike wants to go at with the clutch fuel engaged. Now that's 9 miles per hour at the moment, because the fuel injection system's sensing that the engine's a little bit colder, so I'm doing 9 miles per hour at the moment. Even going up the hill just now, I'm not touching the throttle, I've got the clutch out, and it looks like I'm in control, but I'm not really, trust me. This feels horrible on a big bike doing this. I'm just having to let it do what it wants to do and just steer it. It's not proper control. If I put these cones closer together just now, I would be really struggling, and you could see my hands off the throttle. Now, look what happens if I even just touch the throttle with a fully engaged clutch. And this is what we get, people who have not got good throttle control. And as you can see, now, but watch what happens when I tame the beast. Clutch, slip in, gentle with the back brake, and look at the control. I've tamed the beast. Feet still up here, steady rev, slip in the clutch, gentle with the back brake. We've tamed the beast. I'm going to talk about body position in a moment in the next lesson. Now watch what happens now. Look how slow I'm going, look at the control we've got. Feet still up, feet still up, feet still up. Now watch what happens when I let this clutch out and I try that. She's a bucking bronco. She's a bucking bronco. She's wild. Now if I try and put the back brake on too much with the clutch out, That's 5 miles per hour. She's juddering, and watch what happens if I put it on more. Whoa, she stalls, locks up, and she'd throw me off the side. So hopefully I've demonstrated to you why you need to learn proper clutch slip technique when you do your CBT. Because if you cheat and you move off with the closed throttle, clutch out, and the little bike ticks over and you steer around the yard, yes, it looks good, it looks impressive, but when you then make the transition to this baby, you're going to have all sorts of problems. So first thing is, learn how to slip that clutch. It's your friend. And as you saw me there, completely tamed the beast. Now, we demonstrated slalom there, didn't we, Lewis? We had the slalom. Now, why do we do the slalom? Well, like I say, it's all about balance, it's all about steering control, hand-eye coordination, and it's all about understanding, in this case for our yard, understanding the effect of gradient and how you have to balance the throttle, the clutch and the rear brake to take that into account, and why we've set our yard like this so we can develop that full understanding so that when you do make the transition onto the road, it's going to improve your rider skills so much more. And as you've just seen, when you then make the transition to the direct access bike or the larger bike, if you're on A2, it's still the same bike just with a restrictor fitted, that you're going to be able to make that transition much easier. That one typically will do 3 miles per hour with a closed throttle and a clutch out fully, 3 to 4, which is fine for slow speed manoeuvres for most people, especially upright. When you're doing the actual turns, you probably want to be doing figure 8 and U-turns, probably near 5 to 6 you want to be, but certainly 8 and 9 is getting on too fast. And if you jump on something like my father's old bike, a Ducati Multistrada, it did 18 miles per hour in first gear with a closed throttle and the clutch fully engaged. It did 18 miles per hour. So that's very hard to control the speed on a big bike that's got that sort of speed in first gear with a closed throttle and a fully engaged clutch. So trust me when I say you need to learn how to slip the clutch. It's going to be your friend. Now, Liz, I think that what we'll do is we'll just go straight into the figure of 8. I think we'll do this. I think we'll kind of combine the slow speed manoeuvres here. Now, the figure of 8, why do we do figure of 8? Well, as you could probably guess, the figure of 8 is, and I'm just going to put the cones in the middle, Lewis, is 2 cones set up in the middle like this, one here, and we'll put another couple of cones over here like this. Now, the whole idea of figure 8 is to actually be able to demonstrate, again, proper steering, proper balance and proper steering control. Now, the figure of 8, as it sounds, is just a case of crossing through the centre, doing a loop. So if you look at there, Lewis, doing a loop right round, back through the centre again, and a loop right round in a circle. So if you're looking from above, looking down, it would look like the number 8, a figure of 8. And again, it's to develop steering control to left and steering control to the right. Now again, you need good balance for this one. You need to have good control with the throttle, the clutch and the rear brake, as we've just described in the previous lesson. So you're now seeing that these lessons are beginning to build what we call transferable skills. We're transferring the skill that we learnt on the moving off and the slipping the clutch for moving off, and then we developed that more on the slalom, and now we're going to develop it even more now on the figure of 8. Now, we sometimes start off with just big circles to begin with. We'll do big circles to the right and big circles to the left. And then what we'll do is we do a figure of 8 that looks more like an infinity sign. We'll sort of cross through at a shallow angle, go up to top to the corner there, right round and right down. In other words, we make them very big to begin with. And then we begin to tighten them up at the rate that you feel comfortable with, and we start to tighten up that figure of 8. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about body position at the moment and the importance of body position. I'm just going to show you the basic technique first. Alright, so suffice to say then, the figure of 8 is really all about just demonstrating for you, it's all about improving your balance and your bike control and your steering control. So let's put the visor down again and let's go into the figure of 8. So again, doing my checks, you'll notice moving off, making sure it's safe. Even though I'm the only one in the yard, you'll have other students in the yard as well. So you notice here, I'm doing the slow speed riding control, steady throttle, clutch slipping, and I'm now reducing my revs, easing my clutch in, pulling it in slightly, and just controlling with the rear brake as I roll down through. Now, as I say, you could start off with nice big circles like what I'm doing just now, really big circles to begin with. Really nice big ones like this. Looking, turning the head, looking for where you want to go. I'm off the back brake now, bringing the revs up a little bit more and easing the clutch out to drive it up the hill. Looking round to the right now where I want to go. And as I get round the top here and it's wanting to start rolling, I just reduce the revs, ease the clutch in slightly and just control my rate of descent with the rear brake. Looking again, always looking ahead to where you want to go. Now you might notice my body position at the moment. Alright, so that was the bike control, just what we've described, the throttle being balanced, the clutch, the rear brake. Watch my body position now. Watch as I turn the bike to the right now, I let the bike lean slightly in, not too much. If I try and lean the bike too much, look, she just falls over. So I just let it lean about maybe 10 degrees, just enough to aid turning. Notice my body though, I'm not leaning my body in. If I bring my body in, the bike wants to fall over. So you'll notice that at slow speed, we tend to keep the bike more upright, the body more upright. The bike leans slightly, but the body's more upright. Now when you're going fast around corners, you lean with the bike into the corner, but at slow speed you do what's called counterbalance. Notice how I've got the body more upright. Letting the bike do the work underneath me, looking for where I want to go. Now I'll make the transition, watch the body again now, and there's the body, moves over to the left here. So there's the demonstration then of how you're going to do the figure of 8. Now you can tighten this up as much as you feel comfortable with. Eventually we get to a point where we know if you're turning tight enough that we could start to move on to the U-turns. You'll notice that as I turn tighter, I'm letting the bars turn further round, relaxed arms. I'm letting what we call a soft elbow. I've not got a stiff arm here. This elbow's coming in soft and pulling in, and this, my body's relaxed at the waist. It's not sitting up stiff. All right, I need soft waist. I need soft arms and shoulders, relaxed arms and shoulders here. Notice how the left elbow's coming in now and the right one's went out. Now notice how my left arm stretches out, my body moves forward, the right arm comes in, the elbow comes in soft. And now I make the transition the other way now. And again, the left elbow comes in and the right arm begins to stretch out. But again, notice the body's not leaning in. Now I'm going to stop now and I'm going to actually show this, what I'm actually doing here. Okay, so let me show what I'm actually doing. And this is going to help your understanding on the big bike as well. A lot of people make the mistake that when they're going to the left, they turn the bars and they lean the bike to the left and then they try and lean the body as well. Well, the weight of the bike, the weight of your body and the relatively slow speed means that gravity is going to win that competition and the bike falls over. Notice if I lean the bike in slightly, it's natural for me now to move myself onto the corner of the seat and keep my body more upright. Notice now when I make the transition to the right, I keep my body more upright and I let the bike do the leaning. Now just to show you that what actually makes the bars turn, if you watch here, if I push this bike now straight, all right, and the bars will remain straight. If I ever lean it slightly to the right and I push it, notice the bars move to the right. So if those bars are not turning to the right and you've got the bike leaned to the right and it's not turning to the right, it's because your arms are too stiff and you're preventing it from turning. Again, watch, if I push it straight and I lean it slightly to the left, notice now how the bars turn into the left as well. So that's very important. You do need relaxed arms and shoulders. Correct posture, sitting forward into the tank. Notice when I was turning to the right, I moved my waist forward. If I sit upright like this and I'm tense, those bars don't want to turn. This arm's straight and it's not letting the bars turn. So I relax and I go forward with the bike. That arm is stretched out. Notice the soft elbow now comes in. All right, if I go the other way, again, the elbow comes in, the arm extends out, the body moves forward. Now I see some people really tense on the bike, really stiff arms. If you're doing that and the elbow goes up, you're not letting those bars turn. You need to relax the arms and allow the bars, point the bars and let them turn where you want to go and look for where you want to go. Okay, now let's just show why that's so important on the big bike. I'll put this one out the road and we'll go and get the big bike just to show you. Okay, so we're now going to demonstrate the figure 8 with a large bike. Now as I say, normally we wouldn't do this on the CBT at all, but remember this is a training video that we're producing here and I want to explain to you the reasons why your body position is so important on the little 125. It is easy to cheat on the little 125, you can lean your body with the 125, lean the bike, but you won't get away with it on the big bike, and let me show you why just now. So, first thing is I want to show you is that if I lean this big bike that way, That's a lot of weight, I can tell you. And when you get to about that lean angle, she starts to get heavy beyond that. So I wouldn't want to do slow speed turning with that sort of lean angle. That's starting to get really heavy on my leg now. So most of the time when I'm slow speed turning, I've probably got about that much lean angle at slow speed turns, up to probably about 10 degrees. The same as to the left, to there. That's quite comfortable. If ever I go beyond that, I could tell that's getting really heavy on my bike. On my leg. That bike weighs 200 kilograms roughly there, give or take. And when you have a full tank of petrol in it, even more. Now, notice what I'm doing here when I lean the bike. Notice how I'm bringing my body up naturally. If I now start to bring my shoulder in, I could tell you now, the weight on my leg is phenomenal. And this is where we see people trying to do figure eights and U-turns, leaning the bike, leaning their body. It doesn't work. Alright, now, so let me now show you, and I'll clip the visor down as well, because my helmet's not approved for on the road moving. So you can still hear me because I've got a remote mic fitted, so you should still be able to hear me loud and clear. So watch again, I'll explain to you what I'm doing. I've got the steady rev, the clutch slipping as we did with the 125, not using the rear brake going up the hill. Notice now that when I'm going to left, watch my body position here. Look again, the bike's leaning but my body's more upright, looking for where I want to go. But you'll notice this body's been kept upright. Now notice what happens if I bring my body in. It falls over. If I bring my body in, she falls over. Now I can prove this to you by balancing the bike. There she goes to the left, and she's not wanting to fall in. Now watch, she's going to go to the right. I bring my body up, and look, the bike doesn't want to fall, it's balanced. But watch what happens when I bring this body in now. Bring it in, and as soon as I bring it in, she falls over. So in other words, if I want to lean the body in, watch what I've got to do. I've now got to do faster. I've got to do faster figure eights. If I slowed this bike down now, whoa, that's her, she was about to go there. As soon as you slow, you get into drop out. There she goes, she's horrible, she wants to drop in there now. Oh, it's horrible that's horrible, leaning the bike and leaning the body. It's horrible. But if I bring the body up, I'm counterbalancing. And just to show you how effective that counterbalance is now, if for example I let the bike lean in and bring my body more upright, you'll see now we can actually literally bring the bike to a complete stop. And then just move it away again. Now if I brought it to a complete stop like that and lean my body in, I can assure you the bike would fall over. So hopefully I've now demonstrated to you why the body position, look at that, balanced, bring the body in, oh, as soon as I bring the body in, she's over. So don't think that when you're doing these you've got to lean in. Now I can lean in, but look what I'm doing with my speed. Now the more I lean the bike over, the faster I've got to go. If I lean that bike right over now, look at that, I've got to go faster. If I slow that bike down, if I slow it down, that bike would just fall over the now. So I've got to do fast figure eights at those sort of lean angles. But we don't want U-turns like that and figure eights like that, we want controlled ones. At the moment I'm doing about 7 miles per hour just now, and that's a nice speed. In a straight line, I will do it for straight line. There's slow speed straight line, and that's 4 miles per hour I'm doing now. We wouldn't want any slower than that for slow speed riding, 4 miles per hour. But when you're turning, you want to be around about at least 6 miles per hour. In fact, I'll do what's a comfortable speed for figure eights. This is comfortable now. And what is that? That's bouncing between 6 and 7 miles per hour, between 6 and 7. So it's like a fast jogging pace that you're doing when you're actually turning, and when you're straight up and down, you're doing a brisk walking pace about 4. And let me explain why. And it'll bring this one to an end. And that is that when you're completely upright, all the weight's straight down, so you can easily get away with 4 miles per hour. But when you are turning, there's a certain amount of gravity trying to pull the bike over. And that's why you're sort of counterbalancing your body weight to help. If you imagine, if you lean that bike wants to fall in. That's why you need to generate enough speed to try and maintain the balance of the bike, and counterbalancing your body helps to keep the bike up. So this is why it's so important that you get a good quality CBT and you're actually taught about correct body position, so that when you learn to ride your 125, you're not setting yourself up for a fall by cheating and then going to get caught out when you make the transition to the big bike. The same as the slow speed riding. Again, if you're riding with a closed throttle, clutch out, digga, steering it around the yard like we often see. We see some people coming in and they tell us they've got a certificate and they can ride a 125, and then we have to spend time with them developing their bike control skills because they've not developed a full understanding of how to slip a clutch. So make sure you know how to slip the clutch and make sure you know how to position your bike. Now I'm going to show you some typical student faults that we see at the end of the videos, at the end of each session, but at the moment I'm just focusing on correct technique at the moment. So there you go then, that was an explanation of the figure 8, a demonstration of correct technique and why the body position, etc, is so important. Okay then, well, we're now going to look now at the U-turn manoeuvre, and the last manoeuvre there we looked at the figure of 8, and prior to that we looked at slalom and slow speed riding. The great thing now is we're now getting what we call skills transfer. We're starting to build on the previous skills. So as you can imagine now, the manoeuvre that I'm going to teach you now, and this is why I'm grouping all these videos together, I'm kind of planning this as I go here. The idea is to sort of do all the slow speed manoeuvres together in the one video for you, so that they sort of complement each other and there's a natural build and a natural progression to the videos. So I'm now going to show you how we're going to use the techniques that we've already learned on the moving off and the slow speed riding, because to do what we're going to do next we need to be able to move off. We're going to do a U-turn next. The car drivers will remember this is a 3-point turn, but we call it a U-turn. And just for the purposes of an explanation here, we've got the cones here on the line simulating effectively the curb or the roadside verge on the left hand side. We've got the cones on the other side simulating the verge or the curb on the other side. So this would be your centre road up through here, the centre lane. So we'd have traffic going that direction. Of course, this if you're in UK, of course, which we are, and we have traffic going in this direction. And the idea is to carry out a U-turn to be able to turn from one side round to the other side, so you're facing in the direction. Now the car drivers will remember the old 3-point turn where you went across, steered to the right, reversed back, put the lock on to left on the way back, and then steered to the right and round you went. And it was called the 3-point because you did 3 moves. You could of course had 5 if it was a narrower road and a longer vehicle, but it was known as a 3-point turn. Laterally there it was called turning the road, and of course now it's removed from the test altogether and replaced by other manoeuvres. However, for the motorcyclists we still have the U-turn, and this involves us moving off with the motorcycle and doing a manoeuvre in the shape of a U, which takes us round and brings us back to the other side. Now, like I was saying there, the skills that I've already been teaching you on the videos up to this point are going to help us to be able to do this. For starters, I've been showing you how to move off and how to stop. Well, guess what? We need to be able to move off, and then we need to be able to stop at the other side. We also, oh, my wee furry things dropped down there. Hopefully you were still picking me up there. I've just noticed that there now. Where was I? Yes, moving off and stopping. We're going to have to be able to have slow speed control to be able to do this. Well, again, I've been teaching how to do that. And again, on our yard here, we're going to be moving up slope initially to begin with, round, and then coming down the slope. But of course, on the way down, we're moving off down the slope, round and up. And I've shown you again how to be able to adjust your throttle, your clutch and your rear brake to take into account the slope. And remember, that is Scotland, it's not flat. You know, we have gradients to deal with all the time, and you need to know how to be able to balance the controls to cope with those different gradients. So we're going to have to cope with the gradient. We're going to also have to be able to turn the bike round to the right. Now if you think about it, that's like half a figure of 8, isn't it? You turn to the right in the figure 8 and you turn to left. So all the component parts, and the slalom, where we're looking where we're going as well, looking where we wanted to end up. So all the component parts, we did that in the figure 8 as well, of course. So basically, all the slow speed manoeuvres we've done up till now lead to this point and assist us to be able to do the U-turn. So let's give a quick introduction to this lesson. Again, the level of introduction we give will depend upon your knowledge and experience. If you're a CBT renewal coming in, we're just going to ask you a couple of quick questions about why would you do a U-turn on a motorbike? What sort of things would you need to consider? If you're going to carry out a U-turn, how would you select an appropriate area for a U-turn, etc, etc. If we're getting the right sort of answers, then we're quite happy with that. We would ask you if you want a demonstration, and in most cases CBT renewals tell us, nah, I'm quite happy, I know what I've got to do, in which case we say, well, fine, well, let's get straight into the manoeuvre, in which case we go straight into it. What I'm doing here is, of course, I'm assuming that, I have to assume anyway, that there's a variety of different people that's going to be watching these videos, from those that have never ridden motorcycles before, complete novices, perhaps not even driven cars before, to those that are coming in for a CBT renewal. So I have to pitch this at a level where everyone can get the benefit from it. So, first thing is then, why would we do a U-turn? Well, you could probably figure this out yourself. This is why I'd be asking questions and coaching, etc. The reason we're doing this is there could be an accident up ahead, the road could be blocked, you've simply forgot something, and you have to head back the other way. The first thing you need to do is you need to find a safe, a legal, and a convenient place in which to be able to do this. So you wouldn't be doing it near a brow of a hill or on a bad bend, where there's fast-moving traffic, where the road's particularly narrow, or there's obstructions, or perhaps close to entrance-exit points or junctions, for example. So the first thing you would do is you pick a safe, a legal, and a convenient place in which to perform the U-turn. The next thing, as part of that, you'd be asking yourself, is the road wide enough for me to be able to do it? And is the motorcycle I've got suitable? Always remember this little 125 will turn tighter than, for example, the SV650 over there. It's more manoeuvrable, it'll turn in tighter spaces. Some of the big sports bikes have got very limited steering lock, and where the SV650 could turn quite easily in 24 feet. These little bikes here will do that in about 14 feet, you know. So you're nigh on half the kind of width that some of the big bikes can do it in. So the little bike is a lot more manoeuvrable. So make sure the road width is suitable for the bike and the style of bike you've got. What would you do if it's not? Well, you're better off getting off the bike and just walking the bike round. It's as simple as that. You know, if you're in any doubts that you can get round safely, then walk your bike round would be my advice. So that's why we're doing the U-turn. Now let's look at the skills that we're going to need to have then in order to be able to do this U-turn. The first thing is we're going to have to be able to move off positively, especially when we're going slightly up the slope. So we're going to have to let the clutch out enough to get a positive move off to establish balance. But before we do that, of course, you're going to have to prepare the bike, and we taught that in the moving off lesson, didn't we? So prepare the bike ready to move off, carrying out the checks. Now those are particularly important, and I'm going to be doing a video specifically on observations, but you need to check your left hand blind spot to make sure there's nobody walking along the pavement or going to cycle off the pavement, or maybe a car coming out the driveway behind you. Check your left mirror, which should be properly set to give you vision behind you. Looking ahead to make sure there's nothing coming towards you. Checking your right mirror to make sure that there's nothing coming up behind you, and of course then the final check, as we said, explained earlier, over the right hand shoulder to make sure there's nothing in the blind spot. In other words, all round effective observations to make sure it's clear and it's safe to carry out the observations. You don't want your actions to affect or anyone else's actions. Now once you've got that bike prepared and you've carried out the observations, that's the prepare and the observations, we're ready now for the manoeuvre. Now I always recommend starting at least half a metre, maybe even as much as almost a metre out from the pavement. A good reason for this, I see a lot of people starting too close in, and as soon as they move off they're already brushing against the side of the pavement. By starting off a little bit wider, it allows you to move forward and then what I call shimmy left. In other words, to make a slight movement to the left to effectively increase the width. If you start off too tight in, you'll find yourself moving off and you'll start to move out from the pavement, and already you've sort of narrowed it before you've even really began your U-turn. So start out slightly without causing obstruction on the road, of course. Start out, move forward, move in towards the left, and then a nice arc looking for where you want to go. So turn the head and look for where you want to end up. That's very important. Don't try and put your tyres where your eyes have not been. Don't stare down in front of you or stare at the clock. Turn your head and look for where you want to end up. And you're going to see this just now when I give the demonstration. Now I will be doing a positive move off, like I said, bring up enough revs, letting the clutch out enough to get that positive move off. If I'm moving off too slow, my feet's going to be skipping, I'm going to be wobbling, so I'm already wobbling before I've even started the U-turn. But equally, I don't want to move off that fast and let the clutch out too far that I don't have control. So it's all about getting the balance of the controls right, isn't it? Moving off with just enough speed to maintain the balance and control of the motorcycle. Now as you move forward and you've done your observations, we look to turn within about 1 to 2 bite lengths, no earlier than 1 bite length, because if you try and turn off and turn too soon before you've established balance, you could easily lose control and fall over. So if I took this bite length as being 2 metres, it would be 1, 2, that would be about the earliest point I'd be looking to turn. And if I did another one, 1, 2, this would probably be about the latest point. So if someone moving off from there be looking to turn here, in this area here. Now it's not really so much distance that determines it, it's the time delay. If you did your check and then you moved off and you did what we call a rolling U-turn, that is that you roll the bike slowly for a distance, then the time delay now from you checking that it was safe to commencing the U-turn, there's too big of a time delay and the situation could change and your observations are no longer effective. That's when we would look to see an additional mirror, right mirror, and shoulder check just to make sure it's safe before you commit to the turn. Most people though will do the checks, move off with no delay, and within, as I say, the 1 to 2 bike lengths have commenced the turn. And that's fine. Okay, that's you going literally straight into the U-turn. But some people prefer to do a rolling U-turn to establish the balance and control, roll it first, then turn into it. That's fine, but as long as you do, remember to do an additional observation before you go. Now remember what we said earlier, when you're turning, we want a speed roughly around about 6 mile per hour to 7 mile per hour. If you try and turn too slow, you'll find that the bike, even at straight up and down, going too slow, wobbles and you lose balance. It's the same thing when you're turning. If you try and go too slow, you're going to wobble, you're going to lose your balance. But equally, if you try and turn far too fast, you're going to probably find you don't feel comfortable enough to relax your arms and allow the bars to turn in, and you'll probably end up running wide. So try and strike that happy balance of a speed that's allowing you to have control whilst maintaining balance. Alright? Now, as I'm turning round, I'm going to be looking for where I want to go and where I want to end up. A lot of people make the mistake of going round and then trying to stop the bike as they're still turning. No, ride the bike forward and come to a controlled stop. So, let's now demonstrate the whole lot put together now for the U-turn. And hopefully we can still hear me okay. So, I see one of my cones is blown out a little bit with the wind, so I have to avoid that one. It is a bit windy today, even though this mic is not showing it, it's quite windy. So, first thing is then, Lewis is going to film this for us. So I'm doing my checks here, left blind spot, left mirror, looking ahead, right mirror, right blind spot, forward positively, shimmy to the left, start turning, looking where I'm going, straighten the bike up forward, and bring it to a controlled stop. Again, using all the controls we said earlier. Again, let me show you that again. Check the left blind spot, left mirror, looking ahead, right mirror, looking, make sure it's safe, move off. Don't need quite as much clutch drive because we're going downhill. Turning the head, looking for where I want to go, easing off the back brake, forward, and bring it to a controlled stop. Okay, so there we go. That's the basics then of the U-turn. Now what I said I was going to do is I was going to also build in some of the sort of faults that we see students doing on U-turns. So let me now sort of build in some of the typical kind of faults. And Lewis, if you can maybe kick that cone over a little bit and line it up, because we've got one that's a bit out of alignment there. That's it. Perfect. Good. That's it. Perfect. So let me show you some of the faults. And I'll try it with the helmet down. Hopefully you're still hearing me okay here. My furry device isn't getting... Oops, I'm not liking this at all here. I just hope this is still picking me up here, but anyway, here we go. Right, here's the sort of things that we see then on the U-turn. People moving off, and again, not doing their observations, and away they go, and they've not completed their observations properly. They checked the mirrors, but they didn't check the blind spots. So something wrong with observations. Or maybe this one, doing the observations, and then taking too long before they then move off. That's another one. Or this one, doing their observations, moving off, but then travelling too far before they then start the U-turn. Too big a delay. So something wrong with observations, in other words. Here's another one that we typically see then, and this is all to do with bike control. Maybe trying to go too slow, doing the checks, and trying to turn, and just trying to go too slow, and of course still losing the balance. So just trying to go too slow. Of course we see the opposite of that one, where people are trying to go too fast. So I'll show you this one, where again, they're moving off, letting the clutch out too far, and then open the throttle, and they've lost control. So they didn't maintain control of the motorcycle throughout the manoeuvre. Other typical faults we see, I've showed you that you should be doing it with the rear brake only. We get people maybe doing it with the front brake. Watch what happens when I use the front brake. And the reason that I've shown 2 fingers only is so you see me jabbing it there. Whenever I put that front brake on, the bike stopped dead and it wants to throw me off the side. So never ever use the front brake when you're doing slow speed manoeuvres, only the rear brake. It squats the rear of the bike down more and it gives you a lot better control. So don't go grabbing, snatching the front brake. Other ones that we see, people totally upright, so tense like this. And they're so tense and their arms are so rigid, the bike can't turn. The arms, look, the stiff elbow, and they're not letting it turn. So they're so tense on the motorcycle. You need to have relaxed arms soft elbow, as I call it, to allow the elbow to come into the side. So the correct positioning when I want to turn those bars, notice how my elbow has to come in. If I've got the stiff arm and the elbow going up, the bike can't turn. If I'm sitting upright like that, that bar can't go forward because I'm sitting upright. I need to go forward, so I need to have a relaxed waist, relaxed arms and shoulders. So being too tense, in other words. Other ones that we see, leaning the bike too much. So they're trying to turn, lean the bike too much, and the bike just falls over. Cool, you're making the bike too heavy. Or leaning their body over too much, leaning the body in, and again it falls over. Remember what we said, let the bike lean a little bit, but keep your body more upright, like what I'm doing just now, in a nice speed. Now there's a nice posture for it. Notice the bike's just leaning about 10 degrees. I'm relaxing it. We see people sawing the steering, turning, straightening. Let the bars turn and keep them turned. You don't need to hit the lock stops, which means full lock, but you do need to give a healthy bit of turn and relaxed arms. Now at the moment, I've got those arms relaxed at the moment, totally relaxed. But body's more upright and the bike's just doing the work, and I'm turning my head, looking where I'm going. Other ones that we see, people driving forward but looking down at the clocks, not looking where they're going. Now if they do that, or staring at the curb at the other side, when you get moving off, turn the head and look for where you want to go. So basically the U-turn really pulls all that together then, what we were teaching earlier. Moving off positively, balancing your control so you've got just the right amount of speed to maintain the balance of the motorcycle, but without going that fast or too fast that you feel like you're losing control. Allowing the bike to lean a certain amount to aid the turning, but not too much that it wants to fall over, about 10 degrees in other words. And again, trying to keep your body more upright, not leaning the body in. If you lean the body in at slow speed, the bike wants to fall over. And as I say, balancing the throttle, the clutch and the rear brake, and having that nice speed and looking for where you want to go. Now let me just show you something here that not a lot of people realise, and that is that if I put this bike just now to the side of that cone, and I'm going to show you this for everyone's benefit here, I put this bike so the tyre is to the edge of that cone. And Lewis, if you come here, Lewis, you'll see that I'm not cheating here. The tyre is on the edge of that cone, isn't it? Yeah. Now if I had the ability to go into full lock from there and walk that bike round, full lock, and bring another cone in for me, Lewis, and put it against the tyre. So just bring a cone, Lewis, yeah, over you come, and just put it against the tyre. And that's it, put it against the edge of the tyre. Now, in theory, you would think that's the tightest then that bike could possibly have turned, because I went to full lock, didn't I? I went to full lock. Well, I'm going to show you now why it's important to lean a bike slightly. If you measure the outer circumference in the middle of a tyre, it's actually longer than it is when the motorcycle starts to lean. If you measure it in from the centre, it's less. Now let me demonstrate this why. Again, I'll put it to the edge here. I'll go in full lock, but this time I'll allow the bike to lean in, and watch what happens this time. Woo! There you go, my magic trick. Alright, so you can see there, I've gained quite a bit in terms of distance there, probably about almost half a metre I've gained just by leaning the motorcycle. So that's why it's so important to lean the motorcycle. It aids turning tighter. Also, if I try to turn with the bike completely upright, watch what happens. Every time I put this down, it moves my mic, so please bear with me. I'm just going to keep it up this time because I don't want to move this mic. It might be losing quality here. Now watch what happens this time with the body position then and the bike lean. If I have the bike leaning a certain amount, that bike wants to turn nicely. My body position straight up and down, my head turned. Watch what happens though if I try and bring a bike totally upright, it doesn't turn. And we see a lot of people trying to do this. Instead of leaning the bike too much, they do the opposite. They try to turn the bike with the bike totally upright. And I'm telling you now, this bike, it just doesn't want to turn. It wants to go wide. So trust me, you do need to lean the bike a certain amount. So you might think to yourself, oh well, I'll solve that problem with the bike falling over, I just won't lean it, it won't turn. If you've got a bike completely upright and you try and steer it to the right, it wants to flip out. So you do need to lean it a certain amount to aid turning. Alright, so there you go, we've done quite a bit for the slow speed manoeuvres for you, and hopefully that's helped. I'm going to do some other little quick faults now on the on some other the skills that we've been teaching as well, just to tag on at the end of some of the other ones as well, because so far what I've done is given you like an introduction to lesson. I've given you a correct demonstration of how it should be done, but what I'm also want to show tagged on at the end of each skill is the typical sort of student faults that we see as well. Okay, so we'll show you some of them now. Okay, so I'm now going to show you some of the areas of weakness that we see with the slow speed riding. Alright. Okay, so here we go, slow speed riding. So the first thing is, when riding round, allowing the clutch out fully, alright, not controlling the clutch. Closing the throttle completely. So the bike, it looks like we're doing slow speed riding, but we're not really. And then of course, when they touch the throttle, you've not got complete control of the motorcycle. Another common one we see is people flapping the legs like this. If you're going to do anything to maintain balance, move the upper body to maintain the balance. Don't flap your legs. Other common ones, too much revs. All you're doing is burning out the clutch if you're doing that. Other common fault, blipping the throttle. It's not necessary. Just a little steady rev is all you need, just a little lively hum. Pulling the clutch in too much up the slope, and of course the bike stops. So in other words, not controlling the clutch properly, either letting it out too much or pulling it in too much. As one person said to me, when you've got the clutch at the sweet spot, just out from the biting point, it's almost like you're just relaxing and tightening the muscles on your fingers. That was a mate of mine, Kenny, that told me that one years ago, and I thought, yeah, that's a great one. I've always kept that, because if you come closer, Lewis, if you're doing that with the clutch, I could tell you now you've not got proper clutch control. Watch me, I'm slipping this clutch, and watch how little that clutch is moving. There's me going up the hill. You didn't even see that move there. Now watch, I'm going to go down the hill, come round the other side quickly, Lewis. Ah, you missed that one there. Okay, you need to be able to see the clutch, Lewis. What I'm doing, you need to follow the clutch, Lewis. You need to follow the clutch, keep on it, keep on the clutch. So I'm going up the hill now, and you'll notice that clutch is, I've just eased out about a millimetre to get it up the hill. Now going down the hill, slope, and it's just pulled in about a millimetre. So I'm only really moving it in and out about the thickness of a credit card. It's very, very fine adjustment. If you're doing that, I could tell you now you've not got good clutch control. You're just very, very fine adjustment on that clutch, very fine balance on the clutch. Okay, so there's the sort of things then we see wrong with the slow speed riding. People looking down at the clocks, that's another one, looking down or looking at the clutch. They should be raising the vision, they should be looking where they're going. As I said, excessive revs or blipping the throttle, we don't need it. The clutch, moving it in and out too much, going from fully engaged to fully disengaged, it's what I call punch and glide, that's not good either. We want the clutch, if that's the biting point, is just out from that, and then you're just moving it in and out, almost like you're just tightening and relaxing the muscles on your fingers. If you're doing big movement, you're going from fully engaged to fully disengaged, so you're not doing the clutch properly. And as I say, just a gentle lively hum with the throttle. Other one round this side, Lewis, which is quite a common one, we see a lot of people putting far too much back brake on. Now when they put a lot of back brake on like that, the bike wants to slow down too much and go too slow, so invariably they end up letting the clutch further out to try and drive against the back brake. That then pulls the revs down, so guess what, they put more throttle on and give more power. That then makes the bike pull harder against the back brake, so guess what, they put more back brake on. Then guess what, they have to end up letting the clutch out further. Eventually you've got the bike fighting against itself. You've got the bike trying to rev too high, you've got the back brake on, rear brake on too much, and the clutch is smoking and burning. When you're doing it right, you should have just a gentle lively hum. You should just be caressing the back brake lightly, very, very light. The sort of pressure that would just be crushing a ripe soft strawberry. You're just really just taking up the slack. It's just a very, very soft. If there's a sponge filled with water, you'd just be trickling the water out. It wouldn't be squirting out. It's just gentle, it's soft. And the clutch, very, very fine movement on the clutch. Alright? And that's the sort of typical things that we see wrong with the slow speed riding. And hopefully, as I say, we can help you with that one as well. Okay? So there we go, there's slow speed riding. So let's talk about some of the areas of weakness then we see with the slalom. Well, some of the things we see wrong with the slalom is, first of all, not raising the vision, not looking ahead, tending to look down and focus on one cone at a time. That's what we call hazard fixation. You become so obsessed by the first cone, you miss the second one. But incidentally, the same sort of thing can happen out on the road with bends. Instead of looking through the bends and extending vision, you're focused too much on one hazard at a time. And that could be true in the town with pedestrians, parked cars. If you're focused on the immediate hazard in front, you're not thinking about the ones up ahead. So that's what we call planning. So even in the yard, we're trying to get that concept of extending the vision, scanning, extending the vision. So there's the first thing. What else do we see wrong with the slalom? Not balancing the controls correctly. Either too much revs, not enough revs, either clutch out too far or clutch in too far, or moving the clutch in and out. So not balancing the clutch effectively for the situation that you're in, and not using the rear brake correctly, either overusing the back brake or not using it at all. So something wrong with the controls, not using the controls properly. And as a common one, staring down at the speedo or staring down at the controls rather than looking forward. Another one, flapping the knees back and forward instead of just moving the waist. Another one, trying to go too close to the cones. Now we're going to, some of these cones are a bit tight now because we're set up for another exercise, but we'll stretch them out very quickly. We'll cut the camera at this point and we'll stretch them out and we'll do the slalom. Okay, so we're going to now demonstrate some of the typical kind of weaknesses that we see with the slalom then. Now Lewis has went and set up a tougher challenge for me here. He's put them 3 metres apart. We would never make them as tight as that for yourselves. We would have them at least 4 to 5 metres apart. So the first thing is we always enter between the first and the second, and I'm moving my vision up and down the cones here. But this person's staring down. You can see the head turned down, looking and not lifting the vision up. So that's the first one. Look at this person going too close to the cones and brushing against the cones and knocking the cones. Alright, so that's when you go too close. Now look at this person going too far out. The problem with that, it makes it seem like it's going to be easier, but it's not. It's incredibly difficult now for me to try and zigzag back away over here and then to try and get back again. That's very difficult. Now the correct way to do it, as I say, is half a metre. There we go. And that's the correct distance. So not too close, not too far away. Look at this person. Wobbling the legs. If you want to move anything, it's the upper body that you move. So move the upper body to maintain the balance. Don't flap the legs about, okay? And again, this person, high revs, going down the slope, no need for it, clutch driving, back brake on hard, bouncing the bike up and down, not balancing the controls correctly. This one's done correctly here, just a steady rev, clutch just slip no more, back brakes off, using a little slope to help me, just enough revs, just enough clutch to just drive the bike up. Even if I did blip the throttle, you'll see the bike's under control. So there you go, there's some of the kind of weaknesses we see with the slalom. Okay, so let's look now then at some of the typical areas of weakness that we see with the figure of 8. You could probably work some of this out yourself, having just looked at some of the areas of weakness that we see on slalom. Very, very similar. So the first thing is, we see people wanting to look down at the controls. We want to look at the clutch, they want to look at the rev counter. By that time, there's no point looking down at the rev counter. You'll be able to hear the bike, you'll feel the bike. And you don't need to look at the clutch, you can feel what the clutch is doing. Same as a car driver wouldn't be looking down at the clutch and wouldn't be looking at the rev counter, so you don't need to look down. So that's the first thing, people looking down. Second one, we see incorrect use and balance of the controls. We mentioned that in the slalom. So either too much revs, not enough revs, fluctuating the revs up and down on the motorcycle, the clutch, not balancing the clutch correctly at or about the biting point and just slipping it nicely. We see the clutch in and out, either fully engaged or fully disengaged, and this really upsets the control of the motorcycle. Remember what we said, very, very small movements of the clutch. Typically we see overuse of the rear brake being jammed on and off, which pulls the bike, or we see a lot of this one as well. People wanting to go for the front brake and starting to take a hold of the front brake. Remember, slow speed manoeuvres, we don't use the front brake. So those are the sort of typical things we see. Not using the area effectively as well is a big one on the figure eight. Trying to turn too tight. We're giving you a nice big area. Use that area. Only turn as tight as you feel comfortable with to begin with. You don't get any prizes for doing a super tight figure of eight and then falling off the bike. We want to see you do nice big circles to begin with, and then slowly tighten those circles up as you feel more comfortable. Now, being able to tighten the circles up is all to do with having relaxed arms and being able to let the bars turn further round. That's important. It's about having the correct body posture, not leaning your bike too much and not leaning your body in too much. So letting the bike do the work underneath you, letting it do the work, leaning 10 degrees either side, and not, as I say, leaning your body too much. That's all important. So let's show you then some of the typical kind of faults then that we see and areas of weakness on the figure of eight. So the first thing is wanting to look down. This rider's looking down here at the clutch and looking at the revs and not looking where they're going. Okay, here's another one where this rider's trying to lean the bike and the body, and the bike wants to fall over. They've got their body posture all wrong. Okay, they're trying to lean the bike and lean their body, and the bike just keeps falling over. So poor body posture. This person's trying to turn too tight. They're not using the area effectively, trying to turn too tight. Okay, we don't want to turn that tight. Use the area wider to begin with. Turn the head and look where you want to go. This person, putting the revs on and off, jerky, instead of having a steady rev on the motorcycle. Next one, the clutch. Moving the clutch in and out too much. Going from fully engaged to then, look, I've pulled it in too much, no drive, the bike's going to just fall over now. So moving the clutch in and out too much, losing balance of the clutch. Keep the clutch just at the driving point and no more, and then just moving it in and out very slightly from that point. Using nice big wide circles and turning the head and looking where you want to go, getting a nice natural flow, as Valentino Rossi would call it, a rhythm. Through the centre, turn the bars, relax the bars, turn them to the right, turn the head to the right. Look, my arms are totally relaxed here. I'm just letting the bike turn round itself. In fact, I'm actually going to show you as I come to the top here how relaxed I am with my arms. As I come to the top here, Lewis, get my bars loose, and here as you see I'm letting them turn. Look, they just want to turn in themselves. Look, the bike wants to turn round itself. If I turn it round, look, let them go. Look, the bike wants to turn itself. Look, so if you've got relaxed arms, the bike wants to turn. But if I'm tense, I won't let it turn. Watch, I'll go to the top again, and again, watch what I do here. Relax my arms. Look, the bike wants to turn itself. It wants to turn round itself. So hopefully then I've demonstrated to you why it's so important then to have relaxed arms. If your arms and shoulders are tense and you're rigid, those bars can't make that smooth transition. Notice when I was taking my hands off momentarily, I didn't want to take them off completely, of course, because I have to maintain some level of control. But notice how those bars, because the bike was leaning to the right, and it just wanted to naturally lean to the right, turn to the right, and naturally to the left. All right, so there you go. That's again an idea of some of the problems we see. Now, when we do our CBT, because we have different grades of CBT, we have some people who want to get on the short course, typically ridden motorcycles before, then we put another cone out up the top there and a cone at the bottom so we can restrict the size of the figure eight. We do the same with the U-turn. Instead of a 24-foot U-turn, we'll restrict it down to about 16 feet for the U-turn. So these riders are challenged to a higher standard on the CBT because they're going to be making the transition straight to a larger bike. And at the end of the CBT, we need to make sure that they can make that transition to the larger bike and not have to spend additional time on the 125. So that's really the difference between our full course and our short course. Those going on the short course must demonstrate very good bike control in the yard, because it's a shorter course, and also out on the road they must demonstrate the ability to pick up the roadcraft nice and quickly out on the road as part of the CBT, and that type of candidate gets onto our short course. Someone who's taken longer in the yard to develop the skills, we know they're going to take longer to make the transition to the bigger bike, and again if they're taking a little bit longer out on the road to pick up the roadcraft skills, especially if they're a novice rider, then again we know that the longer course is going to be more beneficial for them. Okay, so there you go, there's some areas of weakness on the figure of eight as well. Thank you. Thank you for watching Element C Part 2. Our next video, Element C Part 3, will conclude the Element C training in the yard. We will look at normal control braking, emergency stops, and we will look at the OSM PSL routine when applied to junctions for emerging left and right and turning left and right from the major road to the minor road. See you in the next video.